All right, Jayson Johnson, writer, director, producer, filmmaker. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. What was the first time you remember doing something creative?
Let's see here. I've been pretty creative all my life, but dating back, this is probably not a good thing, but I remember I rented some books at the library and I had some late fees, and the librarian was just like, "You have to pay this," and I didn't want my mom to know, so I stole one of her checks and forged her name and paid the library fine with it. The principal found out, and they told my mom eventually, and it was funny because I was like 5, but I guess that was kind of a creative slash bad thing that I did.
That's like the beginning to a life of crime. What?
Yeah, I know.
They couldn't tell a 5-year-old wrote a check. Handwriting must have been great back then.
Yeah.
How much was it for? Like 15 cents or something? Or
no, it was for like $6 or something like that. But
wow,
I remember,
substantial.
everyone has a unique signature, and I watched my mom sign her name, and then that's kind of where the creativity went in. I copied her the best way I could, and I forged that check.
Okay. Where do you think that creativity comes from? That spirit of creativity?
I don't know, because I'm the only one in my family that really has creativity. My dad was a truck driver. My mom worked corporate. My brother is a principal, and I'm kind of the black sheep of the family. I remember going to church and was really bored. So instead of paying attention, I would just draw people in the church. And, that's kind of, I think, where a lot of that started. So I don't know where I got it.
Do you think that that certain something that is creativity comes from within ourselves, like we manifest it through our experiences, or does it come from some other place outside of ourselves?
I'm going to go with the latter. I mean, I really don't know personally, but my guess is it comes from the creative source of the universe. Not everyone has the talent of creativity, but everyone has a talent. So I think that the creative source touched me with the spirit and talent of creativity, and that's at least what I'm going to go with.
Okay. I usually think about like the Romans, as far as I can tell, or what I've read. The Romans thought about creativity or genius as being outside of oneself. So if they looked at something and said, of course, they didn't say it in English, but if they said, that's genius, when you look at something, a carving or a painting or whatever, then they weren't saying that person was a genius. They were saying that that genius is something outside of them that inspired them, that worked through them to create whatever that piece of art was. And for me, I feel like that's true to a point. Like I can tell if I'm making something and it's just surface level from me and my experience versus if it has that little extra something in there that is hard to explain, or where you look at and you can feel the emotion in it. And it feels different than it does if I'm just producing something myself. What do you think about that?
I would agree with that. I think that, a lot of times when I have a creative idea, it just kind of comes to me. And um, that has to come from somewhere outside of me. I may be influenced by something that I see, but, that spark of creative genius comes from a external source. I'm a believer of God, so I believe that God is the most creative being in the universe. So I do think that um, it's probable that that creativity comes from the God of the universe.
Yeah, the ultimate creator. I agree. I agree that, but I think there is a certain thing you can dip into, and maybe with writing, I feel it. Poetry certainly more than just regular prose, but it you go to a place where this creative spirit or this creative is residing, stays, and then it either shows things or works through you, either by matching it up to things you see during the day or experiences you've had so you can understand it a little better. I oftentimes wonder how angels would speak to people if they weren't speaking in language. So it would they just use pictures that you would understand and give them to you in an order that you would get, like this creative ethereal force of the universe. We'll call it God because that sounds good. But does that speak to you in a way that nothing else can because it knows you like nothing else can? So then when I think about creativity, I wonder what creativity is doing when I'm not paying attention to it. Like, is it walking around its apartment in its robe, drinking some milk out of a bottle, waiting for me to notice, to be able to go, oh, that's the creative thing that I've been trying
Hmm.
to be shown. So maybe that personifies it a little too much, but how do you feel about when you're writing or when you're making a movie or you're coming up with that idea? Like, certainly you can ignore that creative force. Like, if you're somewhere and you're taking a note because you see something and you go, I'd like to write a scene about that. Or you have a
Mhm.
line in your head or something, the writer part of you for sure. And probably that's the part I would understand a little more. The filmmaking side, of course, that's more of you, that you could see something and you say, that's what I'm trying to capture. How do you deal with those times and make notes of those things?
Well, it's interesting. So, like, you touched on writing, you touched on filmmaking, and then there's an aspect of post production, and I think that those are three different areas where creativity can kind of make itself known. Um, whenever I'm writing, I feel like if I have a creative thought, then I just try to write it without any limitations. I try to make it as grand as possible because that's the realest, most purest form of creativity to kind of get to. Um, However, like when you get on the film set and you have that idea and you're trying to translate it into something that is on picture and on sound, then there's certain limitations. It could be the location's not great, or the talent can't doesn't quite understand or agree with that direction, or there's a limitation of money. So that kind of offers or ushers in a new way of creativity that it's kind of uh, compromising, collaborating, and adjusting to kind of hit a new benchmark of creativity. And then I'd say for post production, after the project is shot, and you have your audio and your picture. Um, the editor will be creative in ways that you may not have thought of as a director. Let's say two pieces don't merge together the way that you had written and thought that it was going to be filmed, and then the editor comes out with something completely fresh and completely new that's just wildly creative, and then you go with that. So I think creativity is always around us. Um, it's always looking to influence us in our projects, and we just have to kind of be receptive and kind of be open to those areas of creativity.
How do you schedule your creative times and connections? Like, is there a place that you feel more in touch with it or can concentrate better?
I get a lot of creative ideas when I'm sleeping. So I always have a pad of paper by my bed, and I get a lot of dreams um, as I'm kind of dozing off, and or thoughts as I'm dozing off, and I'll just kind of write down that scenario. Um, I recently had an idea for some sunglasses that I'm still working on the prototype, but um, in the dream, it was like this arrogant director, and maybe it was me, I don't know, but he had these sunglasses that it had four lenses, and they kind of opened up and closed uh, I guess like window shades, but out. So in the interview, he gave the reporter a finger after they asked him a question that he didn't like, and then he closed the sunglasses and walked off. And then I remember vividly seeing that, and I said, "Oh my God, I got to make those." So I'm making a prototype, and I don't know what I'm going to use them for. Maybe I'll work them into a film or something, but that's an example of creativity that kind of came to me when I was asleep.
Is that the new take on like what's his name? Dwayne Wayne?
Oh yeah, those
Instead of the
folded up.
flipping up?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So you're talking multiple ones that just close like shutters? So you can have
yeah,
like a yellow, a tint, a dark tint?
yeah. So you have ones that fold in, and then you have ones that fold on top. So there's
Oh,
four,
okay.
and you can kind of keep them open. So
Nice.
yeah, so I put him in. I have a trademark lawyer, so I contacted him like right away, and
Nice.
so
If you can find a way to put in like night vision or, something like that, whether it's the infrared or the thermal, you can get kind of the predator type view sunglasses where you can just switch through them.
yeah, yeah,
That would
yeah.
be interesting.
Yeah, I think especially in this day and age, it seems like everyone wants to have a secondary option. So I thought that might be something that was interesting, because sunglasses haven't really changed in centuries. So um, it's an idea. I don't know if it'll work, but we'll see.
You got a name for them yet? Like shutter shades or something?
Yeah, I'm calling
It's
them
got to be alliterative.
suicide shades.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, after the suicide doors.
What's the tagline on that?
I haven't
Got
got
one of
that
those yet?
far.
Oh,
Yeah, I
okay.
haven't got that
All right.
far. Yeah, yeah.
So when you're writing down all these notes of these creative things, like do you get at times where you're just in the store and then you think of a line like you're like, oh, this would be a great line for this person in this story or in this movie, or this would be a great way to block up the scene. Do you have those instances throughout the day?
Yeah, it depends. Like, we just had Cinco de Mayo here, and I went to the parade, and there was this guy singing on stage, and he was a he was a Spanish speaker, so I didn't really understand the lyrics, but that kind of just hearing that song gave me a creative idea for a film that I wanted to do. Just kind of the vibe and tone of it. So I guess for me, it comes in all different places. I've definitely gone to like the grocery store, and I'll see someone wearing something, and they'll spark an idea. And I'll have to kind of rush to my car and write that idea down. But yeah, it just kind of comes from anything really.
How do you organize all those notes when you get them? Like on my notes feature on my phone, I'll just think different things like that down. And sometimes I have a different folder for it. And other times it's just in a list in one section. And then I'm like, okay, I need to clean that out and arrange them or sort them with like, this goes with that story. This is part of a poem. This is a different thought. And it ends up being pages and pages of things. But do you have that issue? And if so, how do you organize those? How do you deal with it?
So yeah, that's a great question. So if it's like, for example, going back to the sunglasses, that's something that I have to do immediately. Otherwise, it would just kind of go into the creative black box and probably never resurface again. So if
Mm.
I think it's a good enough idea, then I have to do it immediately. when it comes to writing, um, I'll write down little ideas, and then I have to make sure that I type them out, just so that they're on something. And a lot of times when I write a script, um, I'll kind of know what I like, the tone of what I want to write, but I won't know if it's like a comedy, a dramedy, or whatever. But I'll start looking at the lines of text, and I'll say, "Oh, that's interesting," and then you start to kind of group some of the like text ideas together,
Hmm.
and then that forms the dialogue of the character. So it's kind of, I feel like I write weird because I'm writing in a different way where I write the dialogue before I write the character, and a lot of other writers will write the character before the dialogue.
Yeah, I think it for me it comes both of those situations where you can just have a line and you're like, well, I haven't met the person that said that yet. Or you go, well, this is obviously this character from whatever story that is either still in your head or has been out a little on paper and it's just sitting to the side. But yeah, I get that. With my when I get my notes and I like email them to myself, so then I save that email just in case, and I just put notes in the date because I'm worried I'm going to lose those things, those little gems. And
Mm,
then I email them, I put them in a Word doc, and then I print them out, and then I just cut them into different lines, like physically scissor, cut them out, and then group them in different piles of this is this story, this character, this idea, or quotes or poems or whatever. And then from there, I can take those strips and organize them in a way to see if it's a conversation, if they go together, or if they're their own separate thing. But I'm surprised at how often you can have notes from over a month of buildup of notes, and then you can organize them however you do it. And then you go, oh, this is a whole little dialogue box here of a conversation between these two things. This is a poem over here. This is a story idea. This is just a shopping list. So it's interesting how that works out. And that's one of those things where I go, man, there's something else at work besides me just trying to think of something. It's something else that's trying to get through to me. So I try to set those times aside to be quiet enough and listen and be alone with the work to be able to say, okay, what's the scene about, or think about it.
yeah, I definitely agree with you on that, and because there has to be some kind of creative force that tells you that all of this stuff relates to something. I don't know if us as human beings are able to do that. Uh, I know I can't. So I know that there's a creative force, which I believe is God, that's directing me and helping me to ultimately do what my passion is in life, what my purpose is in life. So I give God a lot of credit, for anything that I do creative, because you know, I don't think that I have a ton of talent. I'm a guy that I have some ideas, and I have a lot of grit and determination, and I don't quit. So that's probably my superpower.
Hmm. When you start a project or writing, do you start with a particular goal in mind, like this is the message I want this to be, this is the point I'm trying to get across, or are you more exploring an idea?
I'm mostly exploring an idea. Like I wrote this screenplay called Roger and Me, and it's about a computer. It's a kid that is great on computers. However, circumstance has him working blue collar jobs. And in the film, I just started working on this character that he needed to get from one point of town to the other. And then I started to, as the story kind of came together, I started to think of influences like Tale of Two Cities. I started to think about the um, pay gap in the Bay Area, blue collar versus uh, tech jobs, white collar jobs. So a lot of these things kind of came uh, to add to the story, but I didn't initially plan it that way. It's just something that kind of serendipitously happened.
I like the idea of using the line blue collar, tech collar. That's good. It's
Oh
good.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I just
You
open
need to
my
throw
mouth
that
and
in
stuff
somewhere.
comes out. Yeah.
Yeah, throw that in somewhere. That's a good one. And then it could even be the name that they call the office workers, the tech collars.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's creative inspiration there because I didn't even think I was gonna say that. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Um, when did you decide that filmmaking was a thing you were going to try? Where did you work on films before? Were you writing and then thinking, I got to do script writing, or how'd that start?
So I think I've always been interested in film. Dating back to when I was a young child, we had a TV and would watch pretty much everything: soap operas, football, movies, and I was just always interested in who was putting the images and the sound that went into these TVs. So that was something that I was always interested in, but I didn't understand how to get into that industry because I had a creative streak in me, but none of my family was creative, and we didn't know anyone that was in TV. So um, through like high school, I was in plays and talent shows and stuff like that. So it was something that I always pursued. But it really wasn't until I got an opportunity to was it sophomore year in college. I got to be like in one of my roommates' films. It was like a vampire film, and I loved it. It was shot with a mini DV cam, low budget, um, but just something was really magical about that, and I just knew that I wanted to pursue it after that.
Did you think acting is what you wanted to pursue, or were you thinking more of the filmmaking part of it?
I initially thought that I wanted to be an actor, and when I settled out in California, which is interesting because I went to school in Eastern Illinois University, and after I finished grad school, I had this girlfriend and I said, we were trying to figure out, are we going to stay together or kind of go our separate ways, and we decided to stay together, but the rule was whoever got the better job, the other person would follow.
Hmm.
And I said, okay, I'll agree to that, but I'll move anywhere but California. And that's exactly where she got this killer job opportunity. So right there, I think the universe heard what it wanted to hear, and I moved there. But um, as soon as I started to kind of get acclimated in California, I went on a lot of acting gigs, but I wasn't getting chosen for them. And I felt like this was like a lot of energy expelled to kind of go to these auditions and to see people that I didn't feel were as creative as I, or had a vision, kind of tell me no, that I wasn't qualified for the project. So that's when I figured that maybe I can do both. Maybe I can act, direct, and write as well. So that's kind of how that started.
Was that initial look into the business like a realization of the machine of Hollywood or movie making, or was it like independent films that you were looking to get in on?
It was really independent all the way. I mean, I started on Craigslist, so I didn't know where to start with this film industry, but Craigslist, I don't know if they still have it, but they had a TV film like link, and you can go there and you'll find people that are interested in doing film projects. So that's where I started, and a lot of those things are kind of a waste of time, but you kind of meet some people here and there, and then from there you get on to more polished projects. But it's 100% indie through and through.
Yeah. Building that network is probably the big thing. I'd imagine
Yeah,
there's a lot of do this for free and then I'll help you on your project, or, it gets you the exposure. You can use it for your reel or whatever.
yeah.
What's the big difference between directing and acting then?
Uh, it's a great question. Um, I'd say with acting, let's start with directing. Actually, I think with directing, you're working with the actors to make sure that uh, you can clearly get your vision across to them, and that they could be collaborators that not only buy into your vision but can add to it as an actor with their creative ability. Um, I think the job of an actor is to um, understand how to take good direction, uh, and also know when to follow their gut instincts when they have a creative like inspiration that could add to the project. So I think between the two, you really have to have a good sense of trust.
Mm.
And I really think that all directors should be actors at some point in time.
Do you, as a director, have you ever like seen someone that wasn't an actor and thought that's the perfect look for the part and then use them? Or is it more important to have somebody that knows what upstage means and what the language of acting?
No, I that's a great question too. I think an actor, as long as they have the presence, the stage presence, and they're able just to be comfortable in their skin, then anyone can be an actor. I've seen a lot of directors that will see like an Instagram post to someone that has like a lot of charisma, and then there's like that person is a great actor. I want to say on Sean Baker's The Florida Project, the mother in that project she was not a trained actor, but he saw her on Instagram, and then he eventually convinced her to be a part of the movie, and she was great. So yeah, I don't know if it's necessary that you have to know all of these actor terms or on set terms, but you want to find someone that is comfortable in their skin, is wanting to deliver a great performance, and can work well with the director, or they have good synergy. Then yeah, I don't think it really matters.
Okay. I see a lot of people like just out in the world when I'm every now and then I'll see someone and I go, man, this is exactly what I pictured that character looking like in something I've written or something I was thinking about. And then once you see them, you can't undo it. It's like, okay, that's cemented that character now. And I need to remember where I've seen this person so I can, if it is ever turned into a movie or whatever, I can throw that suggestion out of, I think this is the person that you want to look for it. But it's interesting with when you're writing a project and then you're either directing or you have a different director, what are the differences that you think about as a writer versus a director?
Um, as a writer, I want to have something that is as close to the text as possible, and that the director, if I'm not going with myself, uh, and the writer, which usually me, has a good understanding of the vision of the project. I remember one of the first films that I wrote. Um, I For whatever reason, I was just like, I can't direct this. Maybe I just had like all these limiting beliefs. So I hired this guy that was, he had directed a couple of other shorts, and he came onto the project, and our visions were completely different.
Mm.
And so when I look at the film, it's kind of like I can see why that didn't work, because it was written as this high tension piece, and then he made it like this, like very relaxed, drawn out experience. So yeah, I think you have to have uh, someone that you have a clear vision with, um, of what the project is, according to the text, and then from there, you know, I think a lot of the other creative differences can be hashed out, but it all starts with the vision and it goes back to the script itself.
I imagine it would be useful to write something and know it as thoroughly as a writer knows what they've written, and then bring somebody else in to kind of to make a, a film of that. And then either way, I think it's probably, maybe it's not a good experience in the sense of it's enjoyable, but it's probably good just to have that interaction, to be able to see the way somebody else works and then take the good from that and then realize the bad and why, and then proceed forth in your own career. But maybe that's also the thing that it takes to be able to say, look, I've written this and now I feel like it needs to be directed by somebody that's directed before. And then you see them direct it and you go, okay, that's just what I needed to see to realize that I can do that.
Yeah, and I had like all these silly limiting beliefs, because I directed like a lot of like really small, no budget projects, and this was, I think we had like $5,000 for the project. It wasn't like a ton of money, but at the same time, that was just like uh, that was the most money I'd ever spent on a project or been a part of. And you know, the big lesson I learned from that is, not everyone who says that they're a director is a good director.
Mm.
So you it really depends on what they've done, and how they interact with their actors, and what what kind of success they had after the film was done, etc. So um, yeah, I think that matters a
Have,
lot.
have you had projects where you were just the director, just the writer, just the producer, and then projects where you've been all of it?
Yeah, I would say like 90% of them, actually. Um,
No.
because I started writing because I couldn't get cast as an actor. So then I started to direct because I couldn't find directors to direct the stuff that I wrote. So a lot of this stuff is just out of necessity. So and then um, once you become the director, you have to have a producer, and the producers that I was finding, they you know weren't able to execute things to what I thought should be done. So it's just like, okay, well, that's another hat that I have to wear. So I'm really glad it worked out that way. But you know when I was first starting, it was kind of a headache, because you want to think that other filmmakers are great at what they do, but um, I think there's a lot of filmmakers that see the red carpet aspect of filmmaking. They say, I want to be a filmmaker because I'm gonna get I'm gonna get a chance to stand next to DiCaprio, and you know whomever is the hot female actress at the time, and that is like 0.0001% of it. So it's just a
Mm.
very small percent of the filmmaking. Most of filmmaking is just you're raising funds, or you're writing projects, or you're just kind of wrestling with what's next. So
Mm.
I think a lot of filmmakers go into this with false pretenses and expectations.
Just looking at the surface of what appears to be the job, but it's not the job. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Mm.
and I've seen a lot of people that are really talented, just wildly creative, but they just don't have the thick enough skin to take all the rejection, or they don't have the work ethic to push through until you get success, and they end up flaming out. So
How
it's
many
a hard industry.
how many projects do you work on at a time? Can you could you be directing a project and then also writing your own different thing, or are you try to focus on one thing at a time?
I usually try to focus on one thing at a time. However, like right now, I want to do my first feature length film. I've done 9 short films, and I think I've got it down to the point where I think that I have a formula that would work really well for a feature film. So I have 3 feature films that are, I'll say, mostly ready to go. One is like, very polished, ready to go. And then there's another one. If I were to get financing, then, I'd probably spend about 2 or 3 weeks kind of really polishing it to make sure that it's really good. And then another one is like, maybe I'd want to work with another writer to really, get that one polished. But so those are uh, 3 projects that are pretty much done, but only one is really ready to go right now. So I guess those are all in different stages. But generally speaking, I like to just work on one project at a time.
Have you done a lot of collaborative writing just on regular stories or just a script?
Yeah, so I'd say like for the most part, I'm almost always the lead writer. On my last project, I worked with another writer, and then I worked with a guy he was not a writer, but he had a lot of great ideas. So I'll listen to ideas and or other writings, um, but usually I'll kind of write the structure of the project, kind of the bare bones of it, and then if someone comes in that has like a good comedic feel for a uh, character, then I'll definitely entertain that, or just depending on what kind of a writer they are, then it's everything's on the table. I'll say this: I have not worked with a really talented writer yet. That like someone that's just like wow, I think they're incredible, and I would love to have that opportunity, but I just haven't had that opportunity yet. Where I would happily let them take the lead, and I would take kind of a secondary role in writing. So that would be an experience that I'm kind of looking forward to, because we're all here to try to learn and get better, and I can't necessarily learn if I'm always the lead writer on every project.
Hmm. Yeah, I've written 2 novellas with another guy, and they were basically started from his idea. So I kind of felt like I was more of the second writer on them. And it taught me a lot about not that whole thing about having a thick skin or just being willing to try something else. And maybe I haven't taken an acting class before, but maybe that whole idea of when you're doing an acting class and you're acting with someone else and you can't say no, you have to say yes, and that maybe that's a little bit of that experience of collaborative writing. And it wasn't a script or anything like that. It's just a novella length book, and I liked it. It was writing is very lonely when you're normally doing it because you're making all those decisions yourself. You're thinking about it a lot, and then it was interesting to be able to have somebody else to talk to about it while it's getting formed. So you got like visualizing the coalescing of a planet, and you get to talk about what it's going to be while it's still turning into it versus you're just thinking about it yourself. You make it and then show it to somebody else. So
Mm.
that was a good experience, and it does make you appreciate writing by yourself too. So it reinvigorated that whole I'm going to write this on my own, but I'm also going to write this other thing. So yeah, it's a good idea, and I think that filmmaking, producing, and script writing and everything is probably much more collaborative than writing a regular book, but I've done a little bit of script writing, and it changed the way I visualize writing just because it's more sparse. Like I'm not super detailed anyway in the writing, but with the script where you just like, outside, night, grocery store, and then you go with it. That's if you're writing a book, you got a page or two on describing the scene before you get into it. So I can see that collaboration of turning it over to someone else, the director, of being the script is just suggestions for the director. And then you have the actors in there too that are bringing their own thing to it. And I didn't think that was important before, but the more I talk to people, the more I think about it, the more I see it, that having a good actor is a big difference.
Yeah, I was watching. Matt Damon was talking about one of his greatest experiences on the set, and he was talking about The Departed, where he worked with Jack Nicholson. And in the script, it said that the guy executed two people um, at the near the airport. It's that scene where Jack Nicholson executes the man and the woman at the beginning.
Okay.
And so Jack Nicholson reads it and he says, maybe if I shoot the guy first and then shoot the woman and then her leg falls on top of the guy or something to that effect. So he just started creatively adding all this stuff to the script that found itself in the film, but in the screenplay it just says, Whitey executes two people at the airport. So a great actor will take that limited amount of information and then make it into something that's rememberable. Because I can remember that very clearly. I've only seen The Departed. Well, I've actually seen The Departed about 8 times now, but you know, I think that was pretty brilliant there.
Yeah, I like The Departed. I call it AKA Everybody Dies, but
Yeah.
not a spoiler for anyone. But the seeing what an actor brings to a script and what a director brings to a script, after you start, I always thought when I was writing a regular book that why wouldn't why would you have to hire a person to write a script for it because you've already written it? And then when I started trying to do it, I was like, oh, okay, it is a different type of writing. And while I haven't written a lot of stuff in script form, I can appreciate it a lot more now. And it does leave the air for someone else to add a little something to it. And I think that if you're not the auteur, controlling everything, that it's probably nice to be able to give a little bit of that control to somebody. And it goes back to that trust you were talking about, of being able to trust their view of it, but also be strong enough in your own confidence and ability that you can say, that's a good idea, but this idea is better, or this is the way the film's going to go versus that idea. So yeah, the
Yeah.
collaboration in that is pretty amazing.
I think it can go both ways though, because like let's say you have an actor that wants to do that every single time, then that could be a bit much,
Yeah.
kind of be a struggle with the director. So I think I think that's where people that are non-actors are great because they'll just say they'll kind of take the director's lead on a lot of these projects, and you're probably able to get something more closer to your vision. Whereas if you're working with an actor with a lot of success and probably huge ego, uh, that might be a problem.
How often do you do that kind of the Days of Thunder thing where you say, we're going to record it this way, my way, and then we'll record it your way and we'll see? Like Days of Thunder references, talking to Cole about, using the tires.
Yeah, great reference. I'd say so. I'm not like trying to think of that writer that did The Social Network, where everything that he writes, they have to say exactly that.
Uh-huh.
Um, Aaron Sorkin.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. He's got some
he
good
he likes
energy.
it to, whatever he writes, he wants his actors to say exactly that, and that makes
Yeah.
him not really a great director, but great writer. Um, so as a director, I'm open for collaboration, and I say, let's do what feels natural. Um, and if the script is feels natural to you, then let's go with that, and then let's go for another take where maybe we change the energy a bit, or we change the blocking a bit. So I always want to try to take a couple different looks at it, whether it's like, we change the intention, we change the blocking, we change, the verbiage, or maybe even the tone. But, letting actors stay engaged in that playful state, I think that's where you're going to get the best performance out of them.
How do you make your shot lists and call sheets and all that? Do you plan with doing a couple takes of each scene, or do you just like if you get it the first time that you think that you want, is that it?
Um, I usually try not to do like too many takes, so let's say, we have a shot list where, we're going to break this scene up into like, four different shots. And then the actors, they, the way that they're reading it, um, and just kind of the synergy kind of going between both of them, and they're able to do it in one take, then I say scrap it. Let's just do a continuous take, and then we'll get rid of four different setups,
Hmm.
and then we'll go for a steady cam shot. So it really just depends on the flow of the film, how the actors are engaging in that scene, and can we do something creative, if we just kind of make this all one continuous shot. So it just depends. I had an instructor in college that said, from this point on, everything depends, and I couldn't agree with him anymore.
Hmm. That's a good one. Do you have any like favorite shots that you like to use that someone could look at a film that you've done and say, "Oh, that's a Jayson Johnson shot right there."
I don't know. I don't think I've found my like my shot. Like I don't have like the Michael Bay. Like where they're getting up and then the camera's kind of panning around, or Spike Lee where he puts them on on a moving object, and they seem to
Oh
float
yeah,
in the air.
yeah.
I haven't found that yet, but maybe I'm not seeing it because I'm just I'm too close to it. But uh, I like a lot of I guess I like a lot of close-ups. Um, I like to kind of capture the emotion, and with those close-ups, I I like to have it to be handheld, so that if the actor moves, then we can kind of get that dynamic motion, and still kind of keep that closeness to the actor.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't know.
What movies when you were younger, like before the life of forging checks? What what kind of movies were you looking at back then that you're like maybe you don't think they're a big influence, but because you saw them when you were so young that you're like that's ingrained in there.
I'd say a lot of Beverly Hills Cop. I saw
Classic.
this movie, Real Genius, with Val Kilmer. I've seen that movie at
Mhm.
least 100 times. Um, uh, Terminator. Name any Stallone film. Uh, a lot of De Palma films, a lot of Scorsese films. So I feel like with a lot of these filmmakers, the way that they shoot their films, the uh, the camera almost kind of takes a role in itself, where things that it's focusing on. Like a good example would be The Fugitive, where they shot in Chicago, and that became kind of a character of the film project. And like whenever Scorsese, makes a film, I think the violence becomes and the things that are used for violence become kind of this character in the films. So I think things like that have really given me an inspiration, and I find myself integrating things like that into my projects.
Okay. Yeah, a good setting kind of does a lot of work for you rather than just in a studio being out there in the world where people can recognize things. That always had a different feel to me in movies.
Hmm.
Do you use storyboards a lot when you're marketing or trying to fundraise for your movie, or how do you work the log line or short explanation of it to try to get people interested?
Um, I have in the past. So I like storyboards just to kind of keep me organized, because if I don't have that storyboard, then my mind is in such a way that it will completely go a different direction. And sometimes it still does, like, I'll look at the storyboard and I'll look at it for reference. And then we'll get to the location and on the film set. And then, I'll start working with the actors. And then, maybe we just do something completely different. But, I like it as a reference. When it comes to investors, I try to do a pitch deck that is like a kind of like a comic style um, description of the film with a few pages, just to try to so the investor can visually see what the film might look like, the pacing and the tone might feel like. And I find that's been really helpful for investors to get on board. But um, yeah, I think anything visual will help in the long run, especially for investors, and I guess for myself as well.
How do you stay excited about the project then? If it's one of these things that's just like, if you have three in the works, how do you stay engaged with them enough to keep pushing them forward?
Uh, I think you just have to believe. You have to believe that it's going to happen. Um, I believe I'm going to make a film, a feature film, and it's going to be a theatrical release. I have no evidence that that's going to happen or that I'll get the money, but I find that if you're in a positive headspace and that you spend some time visualizing that great things can happen and will happen, and usually they do. So that's kind of how I keep myself engaged in the process, because otherwise, you know, uh, it could be hard, because sometimes there's just not a lot of movement, and if you're basing a lot of your uh, attitude or success on that, then I can see where you can become very depressed about that.
Yeah, I find it helps to keep telling the story to myself and like visualizing the action of whether it's when I'm running and listening to music, I'll put a little soundtrack to whatever story that is I'm thinking about. And I'll go, I'm going to think about this scene while I'm listening to this song. And I've picked that song because it made me think about that scene, or either I used it when I was writing it. And then I can just go back to that. And it's of course, an unofficial soundtrack because you don't have the rights to any of that music, but you're listening to that and you're like, oh, that reminds me of this story. Like I have stories or books from the past where I can hear music now and I go, oh, that's this scene. I remember it because I've thought about it hundreds of times, just visualizing it from different perspectives. And I'm sure that's probably different than a filmmaker would do because you got all these other things to think about that I don't even know. But this is just from the strictly the writer side of it, of just thinking about the action like a motion picture in my mind, not knowing the business at all. But the
You know
soundtrack
that
angle helps.
that's actually a great point that I actually forgot. I do go to music score websites. For the listeners, there's a site called Ash and Spencer, where you can kind of type in, it's this tone, it's dark, it's light, whatever. And you can download these clips, but when you use them, you have to, obviously pay for them. But that helps me to kind of creatively think and visualize the project. And on all my projects, I've had like some type of melody or like some type of song that is associated with that project. So when times I want to visualize about the project, then I'll play that tune, close my eyes, and then think about all the possibilities that the project could be.
Yeah, that's how I keep myself interested in it, especially if I'm writing a book about keeping going with the story. And then there are projects that just fall to the side because you've got another better idea that you're going to work on. And you're like, I'm going to get back to that. And that's how most of my script writing has gone, where I think about it, I get excited about it, I write a few pages, I have a nice outline, and then I think of something else and I'm like, well, I got to work on this other thing. Or it's a book and I'm more involved with that than a script because I think there is so much more collaboration that goes on with a script than it does just a regular book. But there are times also where you're writing something and you can't quite get to it. Like you can't reach what you think it should be. So you just say, well, it's almost done, or it's well on its way. It's a couple drafts into it and it's just not as good as I want it to be. And I think that's because I'm not good enough to do it now. So I'm going to set it aside and then come back to it later. You take that break from it, whether it's weeks or months or years. I'm sure there's people that have projects that are just sitting. And then you get to the point where you've forgotten it so much that it's such a job to go back and relearn everything you learned in the research process of it, and to think of all those connections because you've lost touch with them. And maybe that's good and maybe that's bad. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to be able to pick a story up and start with it again and realize those little connections that you didn't see before. And you think, oh, I'm a little better now, I'm a little more experienced, I've had other things that happened in life, or that essence of creativity was just marinating on it, and now I know this is what needs to happen. And maybe you're good enough to finish it. Maybe you have to just work a little bit on it at once. Is that how you view the projects you have, like in the process right now?
Yeah. Um, like I'll say there's a project that I don't feel confident enough to direct that. If let's say I got the money and an investor said, let's film this project. I wouldn't feel confident in myself as a filmmaker to go and direct this project right now, just because one, it's not nearly there just yet, and two, it's a stunt heavy film, and I would
Mm.
want to work with. I'd want to do enough time in pre-production where I learned from like stunt coordinators what's possible, what can kind of be um, cutting edge as far as stunts that we would do. But that's a project or one of those examples that I would feel 100% confident. And then like with my uh, my low budget project, that's I'd say that's nearly there, but there's still some things that we can kind of flush out a bit. So I think that over time, or if there's money that was invested, that just spending a little bit more time giving it polish, then that would be necessary.
How much, how many things have you had to learn through the process that you didn't think you were going to, like, about lighting and camera equipment? Do you dive deep into that, or do you leave that up to other people that are more of the camera nerds?
I've actually I've done just about every position on a film set, and it was all out of necessity, but I'm so glad that I had an opportunity to do it, because um, the more, this is so cliche, but the more then the more you can do. But
Yeah.
um, the thing that I find interesting is, um, if you're a director and you have a good understanding of sound, then what's possible opposed to what's not. If your sound contractor is ripping you off, or if they're honestly bringing the quality to the project or not. So yeah, I think that any type of filmmaker, especially if you want to be a director, you almost want to be in a position where you do everything. Uh, and that I would include acting as well. But um, yeah, I've been really fortunate where I had to learn everything. At the time, I didn't think it was a fortunate thing, because I just wanted to go right to being the director.
Mm.
But yeah, I'm so happy that I got that experience, because it's really made me a better director at the end of the day.
Yeah, those multiple perspectives have to help, even if you don't get lost in something like with camera work and things like that, especially just doing a podcast, of thinking what camera, what angle, what lighting. And I know there could be a lot of different things you could do with it. There's a lot of post production stuff you could do. You could split the video and the audio, and then you could go back and clean them up. And for some people, I know they really like that part of it, but I think it's important to see all those perspectives and have all those different positions that you've worked and considered. So then you can say, all right, it's cool, but that's not my main interest. That this other thing is the main interest. Or, you know, it's, I like understanding how a light meter works and how important different light sources and different colors are from different angles, but that's not what I want to get lost in. I want to do this other stuff. But I know enough about that to know that if I'm ever if I was ever going to make a movie, I would need somebody else that really knew what they were doing for that. But I think you know enough to where, like you just said, if somebody's BSing you, you can pick it out pretty quick and go, okay, you're not the one to do lighting on this. I need somebody different. But
Yeah,
hmm,
yeah, because I like, one of the most important jobs I would say on the film set is the location manager, because they'll go out and they'll find locations, and if you don't have a good location manager, then you're going to have locations where they don't have a surplus of bathrooms, there's not enough room to shoot, um, there's going to be noise that that you don't want to have picked up. So I say all that because I was a location manager for a good amount of time, and I was able to find locations on the fly and negotiate prices, etc. So that's just one small element of a film, but it makes such a big difference as far as if you have a good or bad location. So um, I start to think about all the things that are really important that they don't necessarily get the Oscar for.
hmm.
I don't think there's like a location manager award, but there should be. Because these these uh these professionals work really hard to find something that aesthetically looks great, but at the same time is functional for the crew to pull off a great shot.
What's your preferred, or what type of camera do you like the best?
So I've worked with a lot of Sony cameras, a lot of Red cameras. I haven't had a chance to work with a Ari just yet,
Hmm.
or a high-end Panavision camera. So I can only tell you what my experience is so far. So I really like the Red Weapon as far as what we've used before. Um, I think that that has a good image. I don't know enough about Red cameras, but I like the amount of information that comes out, so that whenever it's in post, you have a lot of latitude as far as how you want to color it, and if you need to change things like let's say you need to push in a lot, you're not going to lose a lot of resolution. So uh, from my experience, just working with different cameras, I'd say I like the Red series so far.
Do you contract out those when you're doing a project, or do you keep your own stock?
So I've befriended a lot of cinematographers.
Mm.
So um, that way they'll give you a friend rate, and they'll be depending on if they're a really cool friend or not. They'll shoot your project at a reduced rate, or sometimes even free. As long as you're not on another gig. So that's kind of how I've strategically done it. But a lot of the cinematographers that I came up with are now really busy. They're either doing feature films, or they're traveling with concerts. So they're almost never available these days. So uh, eventually, I guess we're going to have to find someone that is, we look at their work and then kind of make the decision there. But uh, it's going to be new territory for me.
How much time do you spend on writing versus fundraising and actual shooting?
I would say fundraising is by far the biggest part of this, and I'm counting podcasts in as fundraising, because
Mm.
I'm trying to get my brand out there, get my face out there, so that when I do meet with investors and they inevitably do a Google search, you are who you say you are. So and then they'll be able to find evidence of you talking about films, and the projects that they may ultimately be funding. So yeah, I by far spend the most time on fundraising and trying to get the name out there so that you're successful for fundraising. Uh, Next, I would say, um, I don't know. I kind of feel like you spend more time on writing than you actually do filming, because like when you're on
Mm.
the film set and everything is greenlit and you're ready to go, you're probably on set. If you're on a short film, maybe 3 or 4 days max. And then if you're on a feature length project, if it's an indie project, probably about uh, anywhere from like 21 to 28 days before you wrap up. So I would say directing is probably the shortest amount of time. And one thing that you didn't add on there is post production.
Mm.
Films could be in there a long time, especially if they go through post production hell.
Post production is just like getting the lighting right on your what you've already filmed and editing it together.
No, it's actually so you want to. So there's editing, making sure that you get all of your rights and your clearances as far as like kind of like your tech specs and things of that nature.
Okay.
you're syncing your audio, you're having your score written, um, you're adjusting your audio, you're coloring the film, you're color correcting the film, you're getting it ready for packaging. I'm probably forgetting a whole bunch of stuff, but yeah, a lot of that stuff happens after the film material has been shot, um, so that you can get the film ready for audiences.
Yeah, I kind of see like the actual time where you're shooting it is more like if you're baking a cake. That's just putting the ingredients together. That's probably the least amount of time spent.
Hmm.
And then the baking is a while, and then the getting your ingredients together, getting the money for the ingredients and all that's the writing and the fundraising. Maybe that's
Yeah,
oversimplification.
no, I'd say that's accurate. I mean, you want to probably spend. I'd say you probably want to spend the most time in pre-production, because that's getting your crew, your actors, your location, getting your insurance, working with the distributor as far as how they're going to, package the film. So you're getting all this runway ready for this project. And then, once you have all this runway and everything is organized well, then, the plane can take off. And that's, the shortest, that should be the shortest amount of time. And then when you land, you're kind of offloading that plane, so to speak, and then you're getting everything polished up so that the audiences and the theaters can, receive that version of the project.
All right, you switched up my cake reference with a pilot reference, but that's okay. I can deal with that. Do you have a pilot's license?
No, I don't.
Oh,
But I intend on having a private plane. So
okay.
yeah, so
Yeah, learn how to fly. I had it's the last time I flew was when I did my check ride. So I mean, officially that the license never goes away. You just have to do another check ride for it. But it changed my perspective of just seeing the world where you're flying above things, and then just your idea of distance changes a lot too. So if you had the ability to fly around, it would be a lot different than it is now. I was going to do it for work, and then my wife got transferred to a place, and I finished the license, but I didn't do anything with it after that. So yeah, flying. I like those references.
I
Speak.
actually I have a friend that he had like a Cessna, and I remember riding from the San Francisco area down to LA. And then when we got near LA, we had to go over some mountains, and we
Mhm.
spent probably like 20 minutes corkscrewing up to get
Oh
over this
wow,
mountain.
wow.
And that was like a really interesting experience for me because normally like on a jet that you don't have to do that, but this was just
Yeah.
kind of maybe a step up from a crop duster. So
Yeah, pressure altitude. The Cessna, the 172 Skyhawk, which is probably one of those variations, was I mean, that's the most, I think it's the most produced plane that's ever been made because it's the high wing, stable, and it's so friendly to fly. But I learned on a 172, and then it was like a glass cockpit one, and then before that, or also in the school, they had like an older one from the 50s or 60s that didn't have the glass cockpit, had different types of flaps and things that was easier to fly, but it didn't have all the bells and whistles. It was less power than the 172. But yeah, planes are cool, very expensive. After we got rid of the sailboat, we had a small sailboat, and that's like taking a college class, just a 23-foot sailboat, a college class on the equivalent. You pay 3 or 4 thousand for a sailboat, fix it up a little for 3 or 4 thousand, learn about sailing, and then you go, wow, that was an expensive hobby. And what's next? Oh, I'm going to learn how to fly, and that's multitudes time more expensive, but interesting interesting skill to have. So if anything ever went wrong, you could fly this 747 if you had to. I mean, basically, it's all the same. You can drive a go kart, you can drive a tractor trailer. You can fly at 172, you can fly a jet. That's probably not true at all, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would be up for it. I don't know if but I'd rather be flown around though. So I'd rather have a pilot. So
The biggest realization I had with flying was after the first few times, I was like, man, why doesn't everybody do this? Think of how easy it would be to get to this place, and it's hundreds of miles away. It's so much quicker. And then the realization hits you that if you don't do something, you will die. Like you're up there, and now you have to do this chain of events to get down safely. Otherwise, you are going to die. It's not like you're in a car and you can just coast and stop and then okay, if you get freaked out driving. But you're in a plane, you're going to die if you don't take action. And I think that's why most people don't fly. And this is from me with maybe less than 100 hours of flight time. So I'm sure a pilot that has a lot more flight time than that feels differently about it. But it's that's that's the thing that struck me the most. Of there's not a lot of things in life that you have to do or you're going to die, and that's one of them.
mm. I remember I used to work for Francis Ford Coppola, and he had a private jet, and I would oftentimes converse with his then pilot, and his pilot would say that they're getting ready to go to Belize, and he's buying all this stuff, and it's past the weight limit, and he was always freaking out about it. So I can definitely I
Yeah.
can understand kind of the stress that the pilot has to take on, especially when you're working with someone that doesn't really care about those safety concerns.
Yeah. That's that. It's that whole spirit of let me hire somebody that really takes this more seriously than I do. And then I'm going to do what I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the specialist. Yeah. It's good. It's a good experience, though. I would also say sailing is a good thing to learn too, just in case. But speaking of brands, I know you have a fashion brand.
Mhm.
How'd you get started with that?
Um, so I've always been into fashion. Just something that I just really always liked. I may not look like it, but I have an eye for fashion. I wear like a lot of t-shirts and just jeans, but um, always wanted to do something. So when I started my film company, Strike Five Films, um, I just eliminated the films and then just use Strike Five as the I guess you could say fashion arm of the organization. So I learned how to make trucker hats, made T-shirts, socks. What else? Pins, stickers. And we just finished uh, an ebook called "Forget Film School." So yeah, so we have a lot of stuff that we make under the Strike Five portfolio, and I think that it's a good way to kind of merge the um, filmmaking scene into the just kind of the general audience because there's kind of like lifestyle brands for like sports athletes and stuff like that, but I don't really think that there's one for filmmakers. So
Hmm.
uh, I'm hoping to kind of bring some of the terminology from the film set and kind of put that into our clothing so that general audiences can experience that vicariously through the lens of fashion.
Okay, that's cool. I didn't know you had the ebook out with it.
Yeah,
I've looked at your
yeah,
website for your film website with your reels on there, and then also for your Strike Five, like the hats and things. Pretty cool. I have links of those, and they'll be in the show notes for anybody that wants to check those out as well.
yeah. Everyone, all proceeds will go to making my next film. So Please be generous.
Nice.
Shameless plug there.
Yeah. How often or how much time do you use on advertising, or how much time do you spend on like Instagram and social media things?
I post like every day, like at least 3 or 4 times a day, and I'm on Facebook, Twitter, I guess X now, Instagram, YouTube, um, LinkedIn. I just can't do TikTok. It's just, at what point do you stop? You
Yeah.
know, I also have a Yelp page. I have an Alignable page. I'm probably forgetting some, but it's constant. I'm always posting stuff, and it feels like you're just kind of throwing chips into this black box, and you're hoping for the tipping point, and at some point it will. But yeah, I feel like I do social media a lot.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure how much return you get from it, but I guess there are times if it's for nothing else, hopefully it gives you that sense of I'm doing some work on a thing and that keeps me involved in that thing. But yeah.
So I think the arc of a film director, I want to say, is probably different for like an actor, but for a film director, you go kind of this relatively obscure life until something major happens. So, and then from that point on, all of your stuff gets revisited, and it's I guess if you play your cards right, it's an upwards trajectory from there. But um,
Hmm.
yeah, I find that as a film director, it's kind of hard to market yourself because you're not necessarily a talent or a model that you're in front of the camera all the time. You're making images that can be consumed, uh, and I guess if you're not like trying to make something for YouTube, like a tutorial video or informational video, then it may be kind of hard to break out. So uh, that's what I'm experiencing. It's putting a lot of stuff, posting a lot of stuff, and waiting for the day that all this does kind of have this tipping point moment, if you will.
I wonder how much of that is you just collect enough experience to realize that you have to do it yourself. And then at some point, that's the tipping point where you go, okay, I have all these skills and connections necessary to be able to do it. And now, boom, got to do it.
Yeah, I don't know. I ask myself that all the time because like I'll put something on my personal Facebook page. It's like I was in this podcast, and then I'll get like one like or two likes.
Mm.
And there's people that are really faithful and just I love them so much they like or you share stuff that I just do religiously. And those are people that if you ever make it, you're gonna just really just go out of your way to just say thank you and bless them in any way you can. But yeah, this is I want to say this is as far as a media appearance, and I'm looping together podcasts, TV, magazine, newspaper articles, etc. This is like my 104th media appearance.
Wow.
So I've done a lot, and my publicist says that I should qualify for a Instagram check mark. I mean, I don't really care about that, but I've done a significant amount of press, but it's just haven't had that tipping point moment yet. So still looking for that.
What's the thing that you're spending most of your time on now?
I say a lot of podcasts. I've done in this past 10 days. I've probably done about 6 or 7. So I'm doing a lot. What was it? Last week I did 3 in one day. So one was in Scotland, so I had to wake up at 7:30 in the morning. Then there was one, central to California, and then there was one that was in Thailand, so I had to stay up until like 9 o'clock at night. So it was just like it was a full day. of just doing podcasts. So, but I don't want to get to the point in my life where I said, well, if I could have just done maybe 10 more podcasts, then I would have broke out. I don't want to have that regret. So, I'm going to do everything I can to move the needle to, get to where I hope to be.
Yeah. You can also ask yourself, what else would I be doing? So might as well do what you want to do now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any, I know we talked about the social media things, but do you have any other websites or anything where people can follow what you're doing?
Yeah. So I have a YouTube channel. I'm on a lot of the socials. I'll make sure that you have all those links so that the viewers can or listeners can follow up with me and give me a follow if they'd like.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm just just trying to do as much as one person team can really do. I work with other contractors that will come in, when I work on a film project. But generally speaking, I'm the one that kind of pulls this. This I pick up my cross and pull it every day, and that's this film company and
Hmm.
apparel company. So.
All right. Yeah. I have a couple of those links for your websites and other social stuff that'll be in the show notes so people can check those out. Do you have any thoughts or ideas for closing? Anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't? I appreciate your time.
No, yeah, I just, I guess we usually stop with, any advice to filmmakers, and I guess, my advice is really no different from anyone else that's ever made it. Is, just visualize your goal, work on it daily, and never quit, and uh, hopefully that is a recipe for success because. There's a lot of people that may be more talented than you, but persistence is really the key determining factor to those that make it and those that don't.
I agree. Well, thank you very much for your time and all your thoughts on things. I will talk to you on the other side of this musical exit if you're cool with that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.